Okay, I'm gonna try to get through this one. Maybe sometime either tomorrow or Sunday. I should be able to finish this book at least. Mount Lowenberg. 1 day had passed since my return from Ilgner. I made my way to Ferdinand's chambers at Third Bell to assist him as usual, and upon my arrival, I spotted Eckert. Before I forget to mention this, a question. Someone actually mentioned in a comment that upon using just the first step of how mine had shown him how to compress mana, apparently Daniel had actually doubled his capacity. How long did that take, though? Did it happen with the first time he ever tried it, or did it take like several uses of the first step in order to get to that point? And how much more does he need in order to match Bridget? Because that's his goal here. Anyway, that's all I asked. I want to know. It seemed that he now had the hang of serving as a guard knight in the temple, but rather than standing in front of the door as my guard knights did, he was being made to help out like everyone else. Judging by how unfazed the blue priest and attendants all were, this was already a common sight here. Ferdinand, should you really be making Eggert do paperwork? Isn't he your only guard knight? You, Rosemine, require a guard beside you at all times, especially with the increased activity of priests as of late. But I have no such need myself. I can make do on my own, even in the case of a surprise attack. You, on the other hand, collapse without even needing someone to attack you. Could the difference between us be any clearer? There was nothing I could say to that. I really did collapse on my own, so having someone watch over me was crucial. My hope had been that Daniel could do scholar work even on days when Bridget was absent, but Ferdinand quickly shot that idea down. Justice should be coming later this morning. Finish your work before then so we can discuss the season's ingredient, Ferdinand said. Right. With that, I worked my way through the load of math that had built up over my several days of absence. Upon returning from Ilgner, Fran had commented with a weak smile that he hadn't expected a single change in environment to be so exhausting. Thankfully, now that we had returned to the temple, it appeared he was beginning to recharge. Just as Ferdinand said, Justice arrived at the temple in no time at all. A good deal sooner than fourth bell. His eyes shone with excitement as he walked up to Ferdinand's desk with a skip in his step, looking every which way for something of note. Good morning, Lord Ferdinand, and welcome back, Lady Rosemine. How was Ilgner? Did you perhaps stumble upon anything interesting while you were there, he asked, sounding rather giddy. Yeah, we did. A couple of things. First off, some trees that can walk, and some trees that, communicate by scream singing. He then went on to express his excitement about our upcoming lunch, having a chance to speak with me and getting to see the workshop for himself. I'd rather you not make any plans for me. I intend to visit the orphanage today, not the workshop. May I tour the orphanage then? I am deeply curious to visit this place, blessed enough to have received your compassion. From what I remember, the orphans can all read and write. Is this true? Justice asked with an faltering smile. He was a noble, so he knew full well that my response had been meant as a complete, albeit indirect, refusal. Had I continued to follow the social script like a proper noblewoman, I would have conceded here, and Justice would have invited himself into the orphanage. But I didn't want him to get stuck changing my plans for him. I dropped the euphemisms and this time refused him outright. You may tour the workshop and orphanage when Ferdinand is available to accompany you. But until then, you must wait. I feel that you are otherwise likely to wander around on your own and cause problems for me. Oh, is there anything there you don't want me seeing? He asked, intrigued. I shot him a firm glare. A forceful guy like Justice barging into the orphanage to satisfy his curiosity would only make Wilma's androphobia worse. Due to aggressive blue priests, there are great shrine maidens in the orphanage who have grown to fear men entirely. Men are not allowed to enter the girls' building as a result, but I am aware that you are not one to obey such rules. I see. Justice murmured, nodding along while looking not at all dissuaded. So I could go inside as long as I'm dressed like a woman. No! You idiot! What the fuck is Justice on? Seriously, is this guy is just as weird as Rosemine is when it comes to books. He is when it gathers information and all that stuff. Jesus Christ. I could tell from the look in his eyes that he was serious, that he was fully prepared to cross-dress if doing so would get him into the girls' building. I shook my head and crossed my arms in the shape of a large X. No, I hereby forbid you from entering the orphanage at all. What? That's nothing short of cruel, he wailed, but I had no intention of allowing a weirdo who would dress up like a woman to get into the girls' building anywhere near the orphanage. Who knew what kind of negative influence he might have on the children? It just wasn't safe for me to let Justice's curiosity run rampant. As the High Bishop and Orphanage Director, I needed to protect the orphans no matter what. As I steeled my resolve, Ferdinand let out an exaggerated sigh and waved his hand to silence us. Save this nonsense for later. We have more pressing matters to discuss. At that, he cleared the room of attendants. The priests left silently, leaving only those who would be participating in my gathering, guard knights included. Ferdinand pointed at a southern mountain on a spread-out map. Our next destination is to be Mount Lowenberg. The summer ingredient shall be at its most mana-rich 5 days from now, and for this reason we shall be leaving in 4 days' time. It seemed that had I not been well enough to promptly return from Ilgnir, Ferdinand had been prepared to come and pick me up. Ferdinand, what are we gathering this time? A Reesfalk egg. Reesfalks are birds said to ease the wrath of Ladenshaft, the god of fire. An egg from them will be your ingredient. Wait, what? If these Reesfalks are able to calm a god, does that mean that make them a holy bird or something? And we're stealing their eggs? I feel like that must be heretical. I mean, really? I mused aloud, only for Ferdinand to shake his head. Fear not. Reesfalks are not particularly holy birds. They are simply a species of bay beast. We will also have means of dealing with Ladenshaft's wrath, he said. Really? How will you deal with the wrath of a god? Huh? Then his expression turned quizzical. Why are you so hesitant about this? Did you not kill a Snaystorm for its face stone in the winter? If one considers the Talfrosks in the spring and the Xances in this autumn, a mountain of bay beasts have already been slain for your ingredients. Why would a single egg bother you now? It's not that. It's just that the fact that they're supposed to be working directly for Ladenshaft, that's kind of the problem here. You have a point, I replied. The road to my Jarib was already paved with Fade Beast corpses, and when thinking about it like that, stealing a single egg was hardly something to kick up a fuss about. That said, if we do not take care to keep the Fade Beasts on Mount Lowenberg alive while retrieving the ingredient, Ladenshaft's wrath will burst. Refraining from killing them will prove to be the most challenging aspect of this season's gathering. What happens exactly when his wrath isn't kept under control? A volcano! They're going to a volcano! Oh my god! Now I see why she was worried! Ah yes, in such a case, the mountain will explode with fire. That's called an eruption, isn't it? Does this mean Mount Lowenberg is a volcano? If so, what does killing babies have to do with erupting? Reesfalk eggs hatch by absorbing the mana within the mountain, Ferdinand continued. A shortage of eggs will consequently lead to an excess of mana. Oh, okay, so the less mana that's in that mountain, the less likely it is to explode. Okay. Okay, that explains it. Okay. When Justice nodded, providing his own explanation. When too much mana builds up, Ladenshaft grows irate and begins shooting out fire. You can trust us here. I previously gathered too many eggs at once and nearly made it happen. Excuse me, I exclaimed. I assumed for a second that I had misheard him, but it seemed this wasn't the case. Ferdinand rubbed his temples and let out a heavy sigh. That was not a pleasant day. Indeed, at the time I truly thought all hope was lost, Eckert added. Of that, both Ferdinand and Eckert looked incredibly distant. Justice had apparently put them in quite the terrible situation. He was top class when it came to gathering information, but in most other areas he was genuinely dangerous, in more ways than one. Now, Justice interjected, let's not forget that our experience back then is proving useful to us here. I do not wish to experience that ever again. Thus I am being as thorough here as possible with our preparations, Ferdinand shot back. I could trust that he would use that unpleasant incident to ensure we didn't have a similar problem when gathering my ingredient. I shall leave the preparations to you, Ferdinand. Thank you once again. 4 days passed. I can't believe that there's a frickin' volcano somewhere nearby in Ehrenfest. Wow. I feel so bad for anybody living in that area. After finishing lunch, we immediately prepared to depart for Mount Lowenberg via High Beast. Ferdinand, Eckert, Daniel, and Bridget were going to be accompanying me. Justice had wanted to come along as well, but his hopes were quickly dashed. Ferdinand harshly shot him down and used his connections with the castle scholars to push an enormous load of urgent work onto him. There is no end to the problems that Justice causes, wandering over to whatever interests him and paying no heed to the impact his actions may have. He has already caused one such issue on Mount Lowenberg in the past. He is too risky to have with us, especially when this is a race against time, Ferdinand said bluntly, making no attempt to hide his frustration. There were no towns near the gathering spot this time, thank God. Okay, good. So you don't have to worry about any innocent bystanders getting involved if the mountain should erupt. So time really was of the essence. None of us were bringing attendance, and the knights were treating this as seriously as a military march. Our meals would be composed of field rations. We were to bathe exclusively via the use of cleansing magic, and I would be forced back to health with potions if at any time I grew sick. The most I could do in terms of getting a decent meal during our trip was to ask Ella and Hugo to make a packed lunch for me. I consulted Ferdinand on ways to keep the food from going bad on the journey, at which point he lent me a small magic icebox. It seemed there was already a packed lunch inside, and I put mine in alongside it before storing the icebox in Leslie. I'm guessing that was his. Cool. Ferdinand had told me to minimize my luggage so that I could make Leslie as small as possible, but thanks to him I was having to carry extra regardless. Not that it really matters. I still find it annoying for some reason, though. Please take care, Lady Rosemine. We shall ensure your bed is prepared and potions are available for your return. Come back as soon as you can, Fran said before we left, making it clear that he expected me to be bedridden by the end of all this. He was probably right, but I was hoping to get through this gathering session having drunk as few potions as possible. And so, with my worried attendants seeing us off, we departed for Mount Lowenberg. Eckert took the lead, I followed behind with Daniel and Bridget on either side of me, and Ferdinand stayed at the rear. It had been unbearably hot the past 10 days, so one would normally expect in the summer. It felt as though I was melting beneath the sun's rays, and flying high in the sky on my high beast only made the heat worse. I was the only one who felt that way, though, as the knights were all wearing magic armor. Lucky! The effectiveness varied a little based on the individual's mana, but those wearing it could apparently barely feel the heat or cold. It seemed like it'd be so hot inside those full suits of armor that I'd start to melt just looking at them. But they actually negate the heat completely. I don't think that's fair at all. I agree. We raced on and on to the south, passing over the central district with its many farms to reach land of more forests and hills. Eventually, we began seeing more and more mountains, and another short while passed before we saw an especially tall mountain that stood out even among the others connected to it. Is that it? Ferdinand did say Mount Lowenberg was the tallest mountain of its mountain range. A verdant forest of towering trees stretched out from the base of the mountain. Perhaps due to previous eruptions, this was reduced to only small, sturdy trees and grass from about halfway up. Near the summit, there was no trace of plants at all, leaving only a bare and rocky surface. Thankfully, there was no smoke or anything to indicate an eruption coming anytime soon. Here's hoping you're right. Eckert's high beast, a wolf with wings, began descending toward the ground, and so I did the same with Leslie. When we arrived at the base of the mountain, the summer sun was beginning to set. Our work begins early tomorrow morning, and the gathering will ideally be performed when the sun is at its brightest. As for tonight, Rosemine, we will all be sleeping inside your high beast. Enlarge it so once you and Bridget have cleansed yourself of magic. Ferdinand explained, I would not like a repeat of what happened during the spring. Oh yeah, we don't need that again. We don't need that again, or else he'll flip out. His last statement came out exceedingly bitter. It seemed he was ashamed of previously having let us girls sleep in the high beast on our own, given that it led us getting kidnapped and thrown into a risky situation he had been unable to do anything about. That is true. As we discussed our plans for tomorrow, Ferdinand and I ate our packed meals while the other three had their rations. Then, once everyone was done, Bridget and I climbed into Leslie to cleanse ourselves. Now then, Lady Rosemine, I will perform the cleansing spell, Bridget said, for whipping out her staff and chanting something under her breath. I hadn't been sure when it would take effect, which meant I was engulfed by a massive droplet of water before I could even hold my nose. Am I going to drown? Cleansing magic posed no real danger to anyone since the process only took a few seconds. As much as I knew that, in the moment, I truly thought I was going to die. When you couldn't breathe, a few seconds seemed to last forever. Are you alright, Lady Rosemine? My sincerest apologies. I'm okay. I just didn't know when to hold my breath. Bridget hurriedly apologized, a look of sheer horror on her face, but the water had already vanished and I was completely fine. It was a little weird for all the water blocking my nose to have disappeared in an instant, but other than that, my whole body felt clean and refreshed. Please do get back on track, Bridget. We must summon the men when we're done. I halted Bridget's apologies by reminding her that we were in a hurry, then enlarged Leslie so that we could all fit inside. Once Bridget was done cleansing herself, I opened up the door so that the others could carry their things in. Ah, so this is Rosemine's high beast, Eckert muttered to himself. He looked around and touched a seat, commenting on how soft it was at a surprise. I believe sleeping in here should be much better than sleeping outside. Not only are the seats comfortable, but you will have space to stretch your legs. So, Ferdinand, isn't my Leslie amazing? The word that comes to mind is bizarre. Well, he's not wrong. It is bizarre in terms of everything in that world, which is saying something considering all the creatures that are in this world, but still. Why does he have to be so hard-headed? Why can't he see the glory of my panda bus? I know. I silently cursed Ferdinand as he looked around inside with a grimace. Even though he appreciated how efficient Lissy was, who was annoyingly reluctant to change his opinion on him, he had to fix his stubbornness if you asked me. As I watched the knights settle on which order they would perform night watch, Ferdinand noticed me and started shooing me away. Rosamund, there is no need for you to watch us. Tomorrow will not be easy. Rest well so that you are not dead weight to us, he said, and since he was several times scarier than Riarda, I hurried off to bed. Bridget woke me up just as the sun was about to rise. I sat up in a daze and climbed out of my panda bus where I found the knights preparing their rations. These seem kind of bland, I commented after trying some. Naturally, they're made from powdered grains and vegetables soaked in salt and wine, drained of water, and then hardened into balls, Ferdinand replied. Well, I think they would last longer and taste better if you added a bit more salt to them. Yeah, I have to agree. The salt is usually used to preserve, like meat and stuff. The night rations were brown balls about the size of ping pong balls, and they were eaten after being soaked in warm water for a bit. Their nutritional value and long-lasting nature made them desirable to have, but they were far from delicious. In situations where one does not have the time to soak them, it is possible to fill your stomach by simply biting into one and washing it down with water. Adding more salt will make that less feasible. You'll only have yourself to blame for soaking yours in too much hot water. We left as soon as we had finished breakfast, mounting our high beast and traveling up to what looked like a gaping wound in the side of Mount Lowenberg. That was wide enough for an adult to climb through without issue. Since normal high beasts needed to keep their wings spread out, there wasn't enough space inside to keep riding them, meaning the knights were forced to walk inside. I would need to shrink Leslie as much as I could and follow behind. It stinks. I had been anticipating the smell ever since learning Mount Lowenberg was a volcano, but it seriously took no time at all for the overpowering stench of sulfur to hit us. We hadn't even entered the chasm yet, and the grimace Daniel was wearing spoke to just how bad the smell was. Complaining is pointless. You will get used to it soon enough, Ferdinand replied. There was a potion that dulled one's sense of smell, but using it would apparently make it harder for us to notice any approaching Fabius. Oh, okay, downside on that one. Ferdinand entered first, despite wearing a similar pained expression to the rest of us. Oh, he don't like the smell either. Okay. Bridget followed, then me, Daniel, and finally Eckert. Everyone slowly traveled down the side of the chasm, finding footholds on its uneven rocky surface, which I casually hopped down in Leslie. Do not wander off ahead of us, fool. Who knows what might be down there? Sorry. Soon enough, the light trickling in from the surface faded. Everything went dark, making it hard to see where we were putting our feet. The ventilation became a lot more restricted, too, with the air becoming thick and damp as the slope evened out. There's no more light ahead. Use this, Ferdinand said, taking out a potion once everyone had reached the flat ground. He dipped some into his eyes like eye drops and handed the potion to Edgar, who did the same. Soon enough, everyone had done it except me. Rosamund, open your eyes, Ferdinand said, reaching the potion for me. I do not like eye drops very much. I don't blame her. I don't either. It used to be when I was a lot younger and I had to get eye drops. It took some nurses and doctors to hold me down to do that. Now I can do it without too much trouble. I just can't do it to myself, obviously. They are necessary when walking about down here. Whether you like them or not is irrelevant. Eckert, hold her down. My eyes were forced open, and the potion dripped into them. Something inside it made my eyes tingle. A sharp smell built up in the back of my nose, and a bitter taste spread through my mouth. Ugh, I hate eye drops. Please make these taste better as well. A manner of eye drops have a flavor. Apparently, they do to her. Ferdinand remarked. Enough nonsense. We're moving on. It's not nonsense. They do have a taste. As heated as his response made me, I was aware that only some people could taste eye drops, and he evidently just wasn't one of them. Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. So I learned something new every day. This was an area where we would never be able to understand each other. The eye drops were apparently a magic tool used to see in the darkness, and Ferdinand was right when he said they were necessary for moving about down here. My vision was covered in a dark orange filter, like the area was being lit by a dim light bulb in the middle of the night, but at least I could see. After advancing for a bit, we came across a spring where we set up camp to rest. Much like the rest of the chasm, it stunk of sulfur, which led me to assume it was just like a natural hot spring. I wanted to try sticking my hands into it. No, not a good idea. Ferdinand, would it be okay for me to put my hands into the spring? Now is not the time to play around, fool. What would you do if a Fey Beast was residing inside? And what is the point of doing so in the first place? If you wish to wash your hands, ask one of the knights to perform cleansing magic on you. Well, it's not like I want to wash my hands. I just thought it looked warm and would feel nice. I mean, who wouldn't want to get into a hot spring? My suggestion was shot down with a condescending scoff. Why would you ever want to enter such foul-smelling spring? You will come out reeking as much as it does. If you really are so eager, you may be pleased to hear that the raised falk eggs are located in the spring deepest within the chasm, meaning you are going to have to climb into one whether you like it or not. Wait, really? The eggs are being incubated in a hot spring? It's like they're hot spring eggs. As the name suggested, hot spring eggs were eggs traditionally slow-cooked in the waters of a hot spring. This gave the white a nice custardy consistency while simultaneously making the yolk firm yet creamy. In an instant, my objective shifted from stealing an ingredient that calmed the wrath of a god to obtaining a tasty snack. Ferdinand, could it be that race folk eggs taste incredibly delicious? I asked out of curiosity, only for him to look at me with utter bafflement. What? They are an ingredient for potions. You pour mana into them to turn them into Fey stones. They are not food. Oh, right, of course. Oh, too bad. I wanted to try eating some. Why don't you ask them next time, if you guys do encounter a hot spring somewhere that isn't in a freaking volcano, why not you suggest boiling eggs in the hot spring? You know, regular eggs? Then you can tell him why you thought that, because you can do that in regular hot springs. After a short break, we continued our advance, the temperature steadily increasing as we went deeper into the cave. The heat and humidity was entirely comparable to a summer's day after rain, then to a bathroom right after a hot shower, and finally to the middle of a large commercial hot spring. It sure is hot. Well, I mean, you're in a southern volcano, I observed during our next break. Naturally, Ferdinand replied coolly, still wearing the armor that negated all the heat. Even though I was riding inside Leslie, I seemed to be more exhausted than anyone. Wrap a towel from inside the icebox around your neck, Ferdinand said. Right. I wet my face with a cold towel we had prepared the night before, then wrapped it around my neck. The chilly sensation cleared my foggy mind a little. Oh boy, you better hope you don't get a heat stroke. We had reached an area that was almost entirely a hot spring, and the air was thick with steam. I even spotted some reptile-looking things sleeping in the water, which made me realize that Ferdinand's warning earlier hadn't been unfounded. So long as they do not attack us, we may leave them be. It is important that we kill as few Fey beasts as possible here. Why is that exactly? The Fey beasts draw mana from Mount Lowenberg as well. Hunting too many will cause mana to build up within the mountain, which will in turn cause fire to shoot out in an expression of Leyland Shaft's wrath. I could guess that Justice had killed a bunch of Fey beasts while getting the eggs last time. There was no way Ferdinand would be this informed otherwise. The Reesfolk eggs absorb mana much like the Fey beasts. This, along with the heat, causes them to hatch. We had brought one fire Fey stone of equivalent size to the egg, as well as several others. Fire Fey stones of various sizes, all of which are empty in terms of mana. Ferdinand said, glancing down at a leather pouch on his hip. I could guess from how lumpy it was that the Fey stones were inside. What purpose will empty Fey stones serve? When put in elementally rich locations, empty Fey stones draw mana from the environment. We shall exploit that behavior to steal an egg. So we need something that will drain just as much mana as the egg does. Indeed, Ferdinand replied, offering a nod before starting to move again. It was apparently time to continue our journey. I put the now warm towel back in the icebox before pulling out a cold replacement to wrap around my neck again. We walked for a bit longer, the intense heat and humidity making it increasingly difficult to breathe. My nose had gotten used to the sulfur stench such that it no longer bothered me, but there was no adjusting to the temperature. At this point, it was definitely more like walking through a sauna than a bathroom. Even inhaling was painful as the hot steam filled my lungs. The spring is beyond that hole. We shall wait here for the mother bird to leave, Ferdinand said, pointing at a dark hole nearby. This gathering would be a race against time in which we needed to grab the egg in the brief window where the mother bird went to hunt for food. I was a little nervous since I already lacked speed and stamina, and the heat was just draining me further. As we waited, worries about how I would do swirled around in my head. It was hot enough that even staying in one place was physically exhausting. But we kept quiet so as to not disturb the Fey beasts among us. I honestly couldn't say how long we waited. It felt like forever, but perhaps it hadn't been long at all. I came back to my senses when I heard a loud flapping noise coming from deeper within the cave. It gradually faded into the distance, at which point Ferdinand smoothly stood up. It is time. The moment we started dashing toward the hole, however, The surface of a nearby hot spring rippled and something leapt out. Even with the orange eye drop filter over my vision, I could see that it was a blazing red. It was a blazing red, entirely as though it was covered with burning fire. It was as tall as Ferdinand, looking like a mix between a giant salamander and a frail-necked lizard, and was blocking our way in an attempt to protect its own eggs. I would really appreciate you moving, I cried. We're not here for your eggs. Of course, Fey beasts couldn't understand languages, and the creature was already in a fighting stance. I knew it would be easy enough for Ferdinand or Eckert to take down, especially considering all the much larger and deadlier Fey beasts we had fought in the past. But here, we needed to be careful about how many we killed. Eckert, you know how to gather the egg. Damn, you'll keep watch for the race folk's return, Ferdinand said, fixing the lizard with the glare while removing the pouch on his waist and tossing it toward Eckert. I will capture this Fey beast without killing it. You all can hurry and retrieve the egg as we need. Yes, sir. Okay, the race folk egg. Eckert briskly tied the bag from Ferdinand around his waist, the face stones inside audibly knocking against each other. Rosamund, damn you, prepare to move the moment Lord Ferdinand captures the eye rod, he said in a low voice. We both nodded. I tightened my grip on Leslie's steering wheel as I watched Ferdinand withdraw his staff and aim it at the Eldrop, but the instant he did, the Fey beast opened its mouth wide and belched fire. Eep! I shrieked, shutting my eyes tight and reflexively raising a hand to protect my face. Why would you do that? You're inside Leslie. The fire spewing from its mouth didn't reach very far, its range ultimately being about as short as that of a street fire performer, but it certainly succeeded in making it appear threatening. Getelt, whatever. A split second later, I heard a loud metallic clang accompanied by a throaty choke from the eye rod. I hesitantly lowered my arm and opened my eyes to see that it had been knocked back several meters, now hurriedly attempting to regain its footing. It apparently intended to tackle Ferdinand while blowing out more fire, but he had produced a shield faster than it could charge him. He then turned the shield inside out to capture the eye rod as it attempted to tackle him a second time. This was exactly the same method I had used to imprison the Golts last year during the Night of Caesarea, but Ferdinand was evidently much better at controlling his mana than I was, as the shield was steadily shrinking in size. Go, he ordered. We immediately raced past Ferdinand as he maintained the shield, the eye rod rampaging inside as we sprinted toward the innermost spring. Ferdinand, there's another one coming, I cried, turning my head a little upon spotting another eye rod reflected in my rearview mirror. That will not be an issue, came his reassuring reply, and with that I knew he would be fine without us. We passed through a narrow passageway and into a slightly more open area that looked entirely different from all the caves we had traversed. In a world dyed orange by the eye drops, only the spring before us faintly shone a pale blue color. White steam rose from its surface, distorting my vision a little and making everything seem even more fantastical. I could tell from the bubbling sound that the hot water was rising from deep underground, and the complex patterns wavering on its surface were a sure sign that the spring originated from various sources. As I peered down at the shimmering water, I could just barely see the faint outline of some eggs. It was hard to tell since their outlines came in and out of sight, but there seemed to be about 10 bunched up in total. These are the race folk, as Edgar said while pointing into the water. You must gather one yourself so as to avoid the mana contamination. The same as the other ingredients. I imagine that you understand this by now. I do, I replied with a nod. Am I going to have to dive into the spring? It looks really hot. I couldn't give an exact figure since I didn't have a thermometer, but the heat coming off the water was enough for me to know it was much hotter than the baths I normally took. Not as it is now, of course, Eckert said bemusedly, removing his gauntlets and tossing them to Daniel before putting on some leather gloves for blocking mana. He then reached into the pouch Ferdinand had thrown to him and took out a bag-shaped net tied shut, inside of which were many face stones, likely the empty ones Ferdinand had spoken of previously. At first glance, they looked a lot like those oranges you'd see bunched together in mesh bags at grocery stores. Eckert wrapped the string dangling from the top of the net around his wrist, then pulled out a face stone slightly larger than a fist from within and tossed it toward the eggs. I heard a thunk, at which point he started walking into the spring with the bag of face stones still tied to his wrist. Eckert! The face stones are absorbing the heat. You should be able to enter now. Come, Rosamund. I experimentally dipped my fingers into the spring at Eckert's encouragement. Lo and behold, it was now about as warm as an extra hot bath. Wow, face stones sure are something else. The spring's temperature will only remain lowered while the face stones are absorbing the mana. Once they are filled, the temperature will rise again. I stood in place, hesitant to enter while still wearing my clothes, which prompted Eckert to heft me up and climb in himself. The water got to my head in no time, and as I couldn't feel the ground beneath me, I started to cling to Eckert. I have to say, the heat actually feels pretty good. The temperature was perfect, but my floating clothes were getting in the way of me letting out a satisfied sigh. A part of me wanted to strip naked to do this, but my social status wouldn't exactly allow that. plus the heat rising again once the phase stones were full of mana meant that I probably couldn't stay inside the hot spring for very long anyway. What a shame. We waited close to where the eggs were, the water now reaching Eckert's shoulders. Rosemine, I will duck down and pull you underwater. Grab the egg the moment you can, okay? Take a deep breath, and... A second later, Eckert crouched, bringing me all the way down to his feet. I was completely engulfed in the hot water. It was whitish and a bit cloudy, forming a hard-to-see-through haze. But I was still able to reach out and grab the egg closest to me. It felt about as big as I assumed an ostrich egg would be, meaning I needed to use both hands to hold it. On inspection, the egg seemed to be marble-colored, and definitely didn't look like something I would want to eat. Not that they were food anyway. Okay, gathering time. A gathering complete. Uh-oh, you better hurry. I turned around and nodded to Eckert, who tensed his hands beneath my arms and started pulling back to the surface. That was when I spotted something approaching us underwater. It seemed to be following me up. When my head was above the water, I could breathe again. I saw a small monkey timidly swimming over, looking at us with wide, docile eyes. A baby monkey? Just as I was starting to think it was cute, however, its eyes flashed and its arms shot towards the race fog getting in my hands. Rosemine, Eckert yelled, pulling me up just in time for the monkey's paws to miss. That is known as a bataf. This time, do whatever you can to stop the egg from being stolen. It's hardly a strong baby's, but we cannot kill it here. He repeated, scooping me up under his left arm while using his right to push aside the water as he strode back toward the edge of the spring. Batafs travel in groups. If you see one, assume there are 30 nearby. Wouldn't that make them like my arch nemesis from my Arano days, the nuclear-resistant bags of evil and horror? Or nuclear-resistance bugs of evil and horror? The cockroach? Oh, God. Eckert's warning made my disgust towards Batafs explode, and at the same time I remembered how the Ruel fruit filled with my mana had been stolen in the past. I'm not giving this up. It's my very own hot spring egg. I tightly hugged the egg to my chest while glaring at the Bataf, its face twisted with anger at having failed to snatch it from me, and it started swimming toward Eckert and me while gnashing its teeth. Not a shred of its former cuteness remained. Scree! Scree! It shrieked, trying to sound as intimidating as possible as it violently clawed at the water to reach us. The fact that it wasn't giving up just made me more and more frustrated. This one's mine! Yeah, get your own. Get your own. There are freaking 9 other eggs in there. Go grab your own. The Bataf let out another hostile screech and reached out its arms yet again, but this time it wasn't aiming for the egg. It was trying to attack me. I protectively hugged the egg and allowed my anger to flare, hitting the Fey Beast with my mana and crushing it. Perhaps it hadn't anticipated the surprise attack, or a mana attack at all, for that matter, as its eyes shot wide open in response. I could tell from its frozen expression that my victory was assured. Surprised, huh? Well, I'm something of a fighter myself, and don't you forget it. I smugly looked down at the Bataf, only to see that it was now floating on its back and frothing in the mouth. Uh-oh, shit. Did I go too far? I anxiously scanned our surroundings and saw a group of enraged Batafs, baring their teeth as they leaped down into the hot spring from an entrance opposite the hole we had come in through. So essentially they came in across from where you guys came in. An even closer look revealed there were also multiple shadows under the water racing this way. Eckert, there's a swarm of Batafs coming. I expected as much. Lord Eckert, the Reesfalk has returned, Daniel shouted, pointing up from where he was keeping watch. I followed his finger to see a fairly large predatory-looking bird rapidly descending from a hole high up in the chasm. Uh-oh. It had legs that were unusually thick for a bird its size, dagger-like claws, and sharp eyes that were locked onto its prey. Us. The Reesfalk diving at us seemed far more deadly than the eye rods Ferdinand was holding back on the Batafs rushing our way, and since I had its egg in my hands, it had identified me as an enemy. I swallowed hard as it lunged straight toward me. Uh-oh. Oh, great! We can't even see what it really looks like. Crap, crap, crap. Oh, and they're the freaking monkeys. Hello, there are other eggs around. Just go grab them. Eckert let out a low grunt, swinging his free right hand to grab a Bataf, and throwing it at the Reesfalk as hard as he could. I sputtered. As I was still under Eckert's arm, the sudden movement simultaneously resulted in me being dunked under the water. The Reesfalk had dropped the Bataf, dodged the Bataf, and flown back up for safety, so I wouldn't hold it against him, not that I was really in a position to complain in the first place. The inside of my nose really stings, but you know what? I'm willing to forgive him. The Reesfalk stared down from its position high in the air, comparing Eckert and me, who were now safely on land, with the shrieking Batafs kicking and splashing on the water surface as they began their retreat. Its sights soon locked on the Batafs, aiming for the other eggs, and it began its descent. Oh, it's going after the Batafs this time. Good. Began to descend once more. Once he was back on land, Eckert tossed me into my high beast while I coughed with water leaking from my nose, along with the face stone containing mesh purse and his leather gloves. No sooner was I inside than he barked, "Run!" and dashed away himself, putting it back on the gauntlets Daniel had brought to him. This wasn't exactly the time to sit still and rub my hurting nose, so I stuffed the egg into my own leather bag and hurriedly grabbed the steering wheel again. My seatbelt could wait. Time was running out. Bridget gestured for us to follow her back into the narrow corridor which she had been guarding for us in the meantime, and we rushed through the return to Ferdinand. He was now maintaining multiple Chutzaria shields to contain 5 Idrots at once, and it appeared that those stuck inside the same shield were attacking one another. It had required my complete focus to capture a single golds back in the day. But here he was containing 5 separate Spade beasts at once with a cool, composed expression. Status? Ferdinand asked, having noticed us running his way. Bridget, who was in the lead, immediately responded that the mission had been a success. The race folk returned to the spring. We'd fled after determining that its attention had shifted to the Batofs, stealing its other eggs, but it did see Rosemine with one. Eckert added once he caught up, "There's a possibility it will come after us." Upon hearing that, Ferdinand furrowed his brow and turned his gaze to the corridor. It is all but guaranteed that it can smell the monitor from all these shields. It will be wise to retreat at once before it comes to investigate. I shall remain here and contain the Idroots until the very last moment. Go. Yes, sir, Eckert said with a nod, taking the lead and dashing for the exit. Ferdinand, you gonna be okay? Ferdinand would be guarding our rear after keeping the Idrots contained. We had taken several small breaks on our walk there, but now we would have to sprint back without any at all. That wasn't an issue for me since I was riding in my high beast, but nobody else was quite so fortunate. They had to run themselves since the corridors were too narrow for me to expand my high beast and let them in. Will you be okay, Bridget? I wish I could let you ride with me. I am beneath your worry, milady. Enough chatter, you're only wasting your energy, Ferdinand barked from behind us. Bridget and I exchanged a quick glance, then promptly shut our mouths and kept running to the exit. Only when we had nearly escaped did Ferdinand determine we were safe from being followed and allowed us to stop. While it was blowing my nose and wiping my face, everyone else decided that if we were going to rest anyway, we might as well press forward a little longer and eat lunch outside. And so we washed the eye drops out of our eyes with cleansing magic and continued heading for the exit. The knights were all breathing heavily, which was no surprise considering how fast they had run without any breaks. Once outside, the color of the world changed dramatically. The bright sun illuminated a dazzling stretch of green as far as the eye could see, with the sky above similarly bursting with color. It was still a hot summer day, but the air was crisp without the stench of sulfur overpowering our senses. That alone was more than I ever could have asked for. Now that we were no longer restricted by the tight space inside the chasm, everyone summoned their high beast and we flew to camp. When we arrived, I napped in my panda bus while everyone else was preparing rations and boiling water for our slightly late lunch. It seemed that, thanks to me having stayed in my wet clothes during our long escape, I had caught a cold in the blink of an eye. My head was all fuzzy, and while Bridget used cleansing magic on me and changed my clothes, my chilly shakes weren't going away. My neck twitched and I could feel goosebumps spreading across my entire body. Here, Rosemine, eat. You cannot drink potions on an empty stomach, Ferdinand said, holding out more of the rations we had eaten that morning. I wasn't particularly hungry, but I knew that I wouldn't get better without a potion, so I took a defeated bite. For some reason, it tasted better than it had earlier. It was something like thick porridge, and maybe due to how terrible I was feeling at the moment, it was actually delicious. Strange. These rations taste better than they did this morning. Did I not say that you used too much warm water? Your rations were half the size of ours, and you used the same amount as us. Of course the flavor would be diluted. Oh, that's what you meant. That's why I was so confused. I was sure I'd used the same amount of water as everyone else. I guess the reason it tastes good now is because you're the one who made it, Ferdinand. Thank you ever so much, I said with a dopey smile. He offered no more than a tired sigh in response and started eating his own food. Achoo! This is not a problem. I anticipated that you would get sick, Ferdinand said, as he took out the excessively bitter potion and forced me to drink it. As far as I was concerned, something being expected didn't make it not a problem, but I didn't have the energy to protest. I was just too tired. Now looking so sickly that anyone could surely see I had a fever at a glance, I made Leslie big enough for everyone to sleep inside him. With that done, I promptly reclined the driver's seat and collapsed onto it. Does this help at all, Lady Rosemine? Bridget asked with a worried expression, placing a towel that had been chilled in the icebox across my forehead. Her kindness washed over me like a gentle wave. A thoughtful act like that was something neither Ferdinand with his potions nor Bonifacius with his barking about weakness would ever think to do. Eckert, where is the leather bag? Pardon me, Lord Ferdinand, it is right there. Ferdinand retrieved the gloves and small face-stone pouch that were inside Leslie, then tossed them to Eckert and told him to clean them up. His eyes then came to rest on my leather belt, which was resting on the passenger seat. He undid the gathering bag from it and held it out to me. You will be unable to move until the potion takes effect. For this reason, you might as well clutch the Reesfolk egg while you sleep. Considering the mana-rich environment your high beast produces, it shouldn't take it long at all to die. I took the bag from Ferdinand, sighing at the fact that he would demand efficiency even from a sick person, and removed the egg from it. I guess this just leaves the Ruel fruit in autumn. Ferdinand, let's get it for sure this time, I said, frowning a little in frustration as I remembered last year's failure. Ferdinand returned to grimace himself and glared at me. Of course, I will not fail a second time. Rest well now that so that you are prepared for when the time comes. We cannot do anything until you have recovered. Right, good night. That night I fell asleep while hugging the Reese Fog egg and pouring my mana into it. When I awoke, my fever was gone and the egg had turned into a blue face stone. Okay. Is that enough? I'll keep going. Hand pumps. Having completed the summer gathering without issue, we returned to the temple where I stayed in bed until my fever finally went down. When I discussed my schedule with Fran the next morning, he delivered the bad news that there was a ton to do. Both Ferdinand and me being away for so many days on top of me ending up bedridden had resulted in a load of work piling up. It's unfortunate that just a few days of silence leads to such buildup, I said. Or a few days of absence, at least to such buildup, I said with a sigh. Hopefully it won't be long before Camphor and Freytik are able to handle Ferdinand's work for him. Daniel shook his head with a bemused smile. Lady Rosemine, I believe that is too tall of an order. Not even other nobles can really accomplish what Lord Ferdinand does. True, I definitely wouldn't be pleased if someone told me I needed to take his place somewhere. Covering for Ferdinand obviously wasn't something a single person could do, which was why we needed to train a group of people who would divide the workload among themselves, such that the temple could operate without us. And now that Ferdinand had returned to noble society, it was clear as day that he would be leaving the temple more often than ever to do things like visit the castle. Benno and Mark were coming from the planting company today, so I went to the orphanage director's chambers with Fran, Monica, and Nicola right after lunch. It was only when I placed my hand on the door, pouring mana into it so that preparations could be made inside, that I realized something terrible. Oh no, Gil isn't here! Out of all my attendants, only Gil and Fran knew about my commoner past and relationship with Benno's squad, meaning they were the only ones I could drop the noblewoman act in front of. Fran, however, seemed to have some very bad memories of the hidden room and stiffened whenever we got near it. I knew he would still his resolve and enter if asked, but I didn't want to put him in that situation. Lady Rosemine, will we not be preparing the hidden room? He asked curiously when I drew back my hand. I faltered for a moment, then disguised my hesitation with a smile. I was just thinking, why not converse out here today? I will accompany you inside in Gil's place. I appreciate the thought, Fran, but you don't need to force yourself, I replied, with a shake of my head, but Fran continued with a calm facade that made it clear he was indeed going to force himself. Lady Rosemine, this may inconvenience you, but I ask that you help me conquer my fears. You are doing your best to be the Archduke's adopted daughter, and as your head attendant, I cannot allow myself to remain stuck in my ways forever. I wish to overcome my trauma. Had Fran been insisting for my sake, I could have just ordered him to stop, but now that he was asking for my help, well, I couldn't say no. In that case, I shall help you, but if you begin feeling unwell, I ask that you tell me immediately. You need not force yourself. It would be too much of an inconvenience for us to hold our meeting outside the hidden room. As you wish, Fran said, nodding with a faint smile. Nicola cackled behind him. It's like your roles are somehow reversed here. To ensure I wasn't in the way while the hidden room was being cleaned, I was serving my tea at a table outside and facing away from the door. Some documents had been prepared as well, as it seemed there was work for me to do in the meantime, but I glanced back and take a peek every time I sipped my drink. Monica pushed the door wide open and stepped through with Nicola following close behind. Fran, however, stopped just outside. As expected, he really didn't look too good. I anxiously continued to watch him when all of a sudden he turned back to me, perhaps having felt my gaze. He gave a slight smile when our eyes met. I believe I shall be just fine, Lady Rosemine. Fran looked stiff and pale as he stepped into the hidden room himself, but once inside, his normal expression returned. He cleaned and started preparing tea, looking totally calm all the while, but I knew he was good at hiding his emotions. Maybe he was just desperately masking how much he was hurting inside. I leaned over the back of my chair to watch him as he cleaned and brought in sweets. Eventually, we made eye contact again. It's time he smiled like he was holding back laughter. I truly am fine. He's not forcing himself, is he? Is he? I narrowed my eyes and kept watching him suspiciously, but before I knew it, Fritz, who had been standing by at the gate, was guiding Benno and Mark into my chambers. Once we had exchanged noble greetings and were making our way into the hidden room, I turned my head to check on Fran, but he simply placed his hands on my shoulders and said, "You must keep looking ahead." That was how he always acted. I guess he really is okay. I'm still worried about Fran, considering Rosemine still don't know the real truth here. He served tea to Benno and the others, his expression remaining unchanged despite being inside the hidden room. When I sipped my own tea, it tasted the same as always, no imperfections born from fear or anxiety. "This is just a message from Zach," Benno began, "but he's finished a prototype for that well pump thing. I don't know what it's for, but I'm guessing it's another one of your weird inventions." "Wait, he finished a prototype? Not just the schematics?" I asked, blinking in surprise. Benno rubbed his chin, allowing his eyes to wander a little as he tried to remember exactly what Zack had said. He designed it using the principles he told him about, but he wasn't sure whether it would actually be able to draw water, so he just up and made one. I hear he's already put it on the bird workshop's well and has made a few revisions. That must mean it won't take long at all to spread the hand pups everywhere. I want to share the schematics with the smithing guild so that all smiths anywhere can make them. It'll bring in too much profit for a single workshop to monopolize, and drawing water sucks for everyone. So I want there to be a pump on every well in the lower city as soon as possible. I had asked Zack to make the schematics as simple as he could. There was still one part so precise that only Johann can make it, but in general, unless the hand pumps were quick and relatively easy to make, they wouldn't catch on at all. You're seriously doing this again? Come on, think of the profits. Oh, but I am. I may be trusting these schematics to the smithing guild, but I won't be letting them spray the hand pumps for free. I intend to sign a magic contract with them such that Zack and I get paid for each one. Him for designing it, and me for coming up with the idea. The contract will also say that the smithing guild has to pay a similar fee if the schematics are ever used without permission. Huh, alright. So the plan is to have the smithing guild take total responsibility for the pumps throughout the city, Benno said, sounding satisfied now that he knew I wasn't just giving the pumps away. Implementing a system where I charged a fee for the use of my schematics would also help pave the way for the copyright system I intended to put into place later. I have my own secret plots and ambitions, you know. And that's that. Benno, can I ask you to make the magic contract with the smithing guild for me? I'll cover the cost, of course. Benno blinked at me in utter confusion, then massaged his temples as if attempting to ease a splitting headache. Hold on a second. That's one large-scale magic contract. It doesn't make any sense for me to handle it when I'm not even involved here. I suppose, but you're the only person I know who's used to making magic contracts. Benno had sorted out every magic contract I had signed thus far. He was the only person I could go to about making the one I needed for my business. Don't ask me. I'd ask your adoptive father. Sylvester? All magic contracts have to go through the Archduke first anyway. Not to mention, if you want to popularize something new, you'll want to start at the top of the social hierarchy, right? Wouldn't things end badly if nobles found out you started this trend among commoners? Good point, I replied. I could already imagine Elvira getting mad, and Sylvester poking my cheek, asking why I had hidden something so interesting from him. He would. If you're going to take the lead with this, you'll want to go with the duchy-wide magic contract the nobles use, not the city-wide ones we merchants use. This will help intimidate the smithing guild into cooperating. Things will also go a lot smoother if you give a pump to the Archduke first. That should give him a good impression of Zack and the smithing guild, Benno explained. It seemed that he had offered up some plant paper to Sylvester for this very reason when reporting the magic contract. If that's how merchants do things, then I think I should follow your advice. Okay, go ahead and tell Zack to make a hand pump for me to give to Sylvester. And while you're at it, you may want to give the smithing guild some notice about this, since its head will need to come to the castle and to sign the contract if everything goes to plan. I'll schedule an audience with Sylvester through Ferdinand. Zack and Johann started working on a new pump as soon as they heard about our plans from Benno, apparently weeping at the thought of making something directly for the Archduke. Meanwhile, I reported that the hand pump prototype had been completed to Ferdinand, who promptly took me to his hidden room and scolded me to no end, demanding to know why this was the first he was hearing about them. I was going to tell you once the schematics were complete, but they went ahead and made a prototype on the spot. It won't have much to do with nobles directly, since it's just a tool to make drawing water easier, but I think commoners will really appreciate it. I covered for myself even further by explaining my plans to profit from the pumps and the details of the magic contract I had brought to the temple right away. Hold on. I had just discussed with Benno, then I asked him to arrange a meeting with Sylvester for me. Benno told me that using a noble's duchy-wide magic contract instead of a merchant's one would make it easier to spread the pumps. So I would like to schedule an audience with Sylvester. The plan is for there to be 4 signatures. Mine, for obvious reasons. Yours, because you're my guardian. Zack's, because he designed it. And the head of a smithing guild, because he'll be managing the schematics. This certainly does seem to be significantly large scale. Before I speak of this to Sylvester, I would like to see for myself just what kind of tool this is. Instruct the smithing guild to show me a prototype before progressing things further. Okay. No sooner had I passed this request on to Benno than it was decided the secondary prototype planned to be attached to the wall by Johann's workshop would be brought to the temple right away. Zack and Johann were apparently going to explain how it worked while putting me into place. Now then, this is the well you're going to install the pump onto, I said, at which point the group of smiths sent from the guild silently got to work setting it up. Everyone looked too afraid to speak. I grabbed Johann's arm as he tried to slide away into the group, and took Zack's trembling hand as he stood frozen in place with the schematics. Ferdinand, these are 2 of my Gutenbergs. They are smiths who have designed and crafted many tools essential to the printing process, I said, puffing out my chest of pride. The two smiths in question immediately froze in place. Fear and confusion plastered onto their wide-eyed faces as Ferdinand looked at them with an exceedingly sympathetic look. He feels bad for them having to deal with mine. I imagine the road ahead will not be easy with Rosemine dragging you about, but stay strong, you two. Yes, sir. I believe she said you have the schematics? Show me. Zack spread open the schematics with still trembling hands and explained to Ferdinand the principles behind the hand pump's operation. He was trying his best, speaking as politely as he could manage, though he had to keep biting his tongue and messed up his grammar a few times in the process. Johann, an even worse speaker, used that opportunity to slide away and quietly help the other craftsmen with their work. Fascinating. Moving this lever like so will cause the valve to open then. How does that work? Ferdinand asked. Since he was a researcher at heart, the previously unknown physics principle at work in this new tool was making him livelier than ever. That I'd like to see! Zack continued to stammer his way through the questions, but it wasn't long before he became overwhelmed. It's important to make Lady Rosemine used the term vacuum here, so you need to make a vacuum, and you see, she explained it all to me, and, she told me to make it simple as possible. This one part can only be made by, someone with Johann's level of skill, since there can't be any gaps, but anyway, I think you need to ask Lady Rosemine how this really works. It seemed that he had finally given up, instead throwing the ball into my court, and not that I had enough knowledge to withstand Ferdinand's barrage of questions either. It's ready, Lady Rosemine. Right, add the priming water and work the pump. Johann did as instructed and started pumping the handle. After several pumps, water began gushing out of the spout and into the bucket. Oh, Ferdinand seemed to be impressed. This will make drawing water much easier, and while we're here, let's have a girl try using it. Monica, draw some water using the pump if you will. Understood, right away. Monica, looking a little nervous now that everyone's eyes were on her, stood behind the pump and gripped its handle. This time, water poured out almost immediately on the first downstroke. She let it go in surprise, her eyes wide as she looked between the bucket, the pump, and her hand, then looked at the craftsman with visible awe and respect. I can't believe it comes out so easily. This is incredible. Drawing water is just so easy. Ferdinand gave a nod. I see. This is a splendid invention, one that the Archduke will certainly need to hear about. Craft a hand pump worthy of being gifted to him. In the meantime, I shall arrange the audience, he said, his tone conveying more force than praise. Zack and Johann, already feeling the pressure, nodded over and over again before leaving the temple with pale faces. Once we had settled on a date for the audience, I sent a message to Benno to the smithing guild. In it, I said that on the day they would need to come to the temple after second bell when the workshop opened. The fact that I was going to be with the high priest will probably make them nervous, but there wouldn't be any unreasonable scholars there to force demands on them. They could relax and come without having to worry about their futures. The message went through, and on the day of, a nervous-looking Zack and an older-looking man, the head of the smithing guild, came wearing their best clothes. With them was several equally anxious-looking craftsmen here to attach the pump made for the Archduke. It looks a little too large to be carried comfortably in a carriage, I said. Shall we use my high beast? High beast exists for travel, not for carrying luggage, but I imagine nothing I say will change your mind, Ferdinand said exasperately. In any case, I suppose that transporting it in your high beast would not be the end of the world, since this is a high-quality product being offered to Ob Ehrenfest. He was the last person I wanted to hear complain about putting luggage in a high beast, especially given how much he'd loaded into my panda bus during our trip to Mount Lowenberg. I decided to let it slide, though. Now that I had Ferdinand's permission, I brought out Leslie and had the craftsmen put the pump inside. I decided to let them all ride with me as well. After uneasily looking my high beast over, they climbed in with fearful expressions. I can guess it's scary to ride with a noble, but just hold on for a little while. Fran walked through the panda bus, instructing the craftsmen how to fasten their seatbelts before climbing out. Farewell, Lady Rosemine. Farewell, High Priest. I await your safe return. And so we flew to the castle with Daniel taking the lead on his high beast. As we were visiting for an official audience this time, rather than me returning home, I traveled low over the road for carriages and landed at the front entrance. We are here for the audience with Ob Ehrenfest. The thing we have is an offering for him. Have them set it up by the well closest to the Archduke's office. Ferdinand instructed the scholar official waiting for us right inside. Since Ferdinand had made the arrangements himself as the Archduke's half-brother, we were taken straight to the waiting room while the accompanying craftsman took the pump and followed our scholar to the well. You two just need to kneel quietly during the audience, I said to Zack and the head of the smithing guild. Ferdinand and I will do all the talking. As you wish, they replied, placing their hands on their chests in relief. I could sympathize with their terror, as craftsmen would never have an audience with the Archduke himself under normal circumstances. But they needed to be here for the magic contract, so we couldn't exactly call the Archduke down to the lower city. It'll all be over soon, I promise. We were let into the Archduke's office without having to wait long at all. Sylvester welcomed us with a very stern, Archduke-like expression, but his dark green eyes were sparkling with curiosity and excitement over this new invention. I definitely wasn't imagining it. I heard you have an offering for me? Yes, Rosamine and her personnel known as Gutenbergs would like to offer up a hand pump, Ferdinand explained, likewise speaking in a polite and formal tone. It is a tool that makes drawing water significantly easier, and as we speak, one is being set up by one of the castle's nearby wells. This was a surface-level exchange being made purely for the sake of appearances, as Ferdinand had reported this all to Sylvester already. If possible, I would like to spread these pumps all throughout Ehrenfest, I said. As a magic contract for merchants would not be enough to accomplish this, I asked to use one of yours, Ab Ehrenfest. You are none other than my own adopted daughter, but even then, I must see this pump for myself before I make a decision. I show no favoritism, not even to family, Sylvester replied with a small frown. In reality, his eyes were just demanding that I hurry up and show him the pump. Well, I don't mind, but I wonder what everyone else thinks. In truth, it was incredibly rude to send the Archduke to the well. It was located in a cranny on the ground that required not one to pass to the basement, which was not a place for nobles to go. While that wasn't really an issue to Sylvester, who had once snuck out of the nobles' quarter to hunt in the lower city's forest, it was still important that he maintain the air and dignity of an Archduke. I glanced over at Ferdinand, who nodded to signal that he had expected this before voicing his own thoughts. I believe you will understand why the magic contract is essential once you see the pump. We apologize greatly for the rudeness, Ab Ehrenfest, but we humbly ask that you accompany us to the well. If you insist, I shall deign to accompany you and see this tool firsthand. Take me there at once, Sylvester said. He looked thoroughly displeased at the idea of walking there himself, but the subtle spring in his step suggested otherwise. We all headed to the castle well, with Sylvester's guard knights and scholars following along behind. Here is the pump, my lord. By the time we arrived, the craftsmen had finished putting the pump into place, and we could see castle servants crying out in surprise while working the handle. These servants scattered like baby spiders upon seeing us, while the craftsmen stepped back and kneeled. Sylvester stood in front of the craftsman and looked at the pump. Is this it? It is. Zack, show him how to use it, if you would. Sylvester leaned forward with fascination as Zack gave a demonstration, no doubt dying to try out the pump himself, but as the Archduke, he absolutely couldn't be seen drawing water, as we were already significantly pushing it, just having him come out to see how it was used and confirm its value. He knew this, and so despite the impatient look creeping onto his face, he didn't even ask. I determine your request for a magic contract to be well and true. Dedicate yourselves to spreading this pump mechanism throughout the duchy. Sylvester eventually said, his restless frown instead coming across as a deeply thoughtful look of consideration. For a second, he actually looked like a wise Archduke, and judging by how moved Zack and the head of the smithing guild seemed to be, they had been completely fooled. Once we had completed the magic contract, Sylvester and I signed our names with the pen that used mana, while Zack and the head of the smithing guild used the special ink that was standard for merchant magic contracts before stamping their signatures with blood. No sooner had Zack stamped his name than the magic contract was enveloped in golden flames and disappeared. His eyes opened wide and he yelled in shock before hurriedly covering his mouth. This magic contract is now in place, I announced. I hope the hand pump spreads throughout the duchy and makes it easier for everyone to draw water. And so it came to pass that every pump made henceforth would have my and Zack's names engraved on it to clearly identify us as the creators. A necessary development due to the contract stating we were to be paid a fee for each one made. Oh dear. Oh no, we are not going to be enjoying this one. But that's going to be for tomorrow. I will see you all next time.